These are some morbid facts about Steve Jobs. When Steve was 23, he had a daughter named Lisa, but denied that he was the father for several years. A paternity test even confirmed that he was the father, but he continued to deny this until his baby mama took him to court. Steve was notorious for parking in handicapped spaces when he couldn't find a close enough spot. Jobs believed that his commitment to vegan diets meant that his body was flushed of mucus and therefore free of body odors. So he rarely wore deodorant or even showered, thinking that he didn't need to. And his former workers were quoted saying that he was very, very wrong about this idea. While preparing for his role in the movie Jobs, Ashton Kutcher tried Steve's fruitarian diet but had to stop after having problems with his pancreas. It's likely no coincidence that Steve Jobs himself ended up dying of pancreatic cancer. Steve reportedly could have avoided dying from the cancer by having it properly treated, but he refused to go for 9 months, believing that a naturopathic diet would be the better route. According to reports, it was one of Steve's biggest life regrets. When he was a sophomore in college, NBA legend Karl Malone had a child with a 13-year-old girl. The son grew up to become NFL player Demetrius Bell, but he said he only met his dad on one occasion after graduating high school, where Malone told him it was too late for a father-son relationship and that he would have to make his way on his own. In 1993, NFL player Jeff Alm crashed his car while under the influence, killing his best friend but leaving Jeff completely unharmed. Alm then retrieved a shotgun from the wreck, fired 2 desperation shots in the air, and then sat down and took his own life. After 9/11, NFL safety Pat Tillman turned down a multi-million-dollar offer from the Cardinals to instead join the U.S. Army. He served several combat tours in the Army Rangers before he was tragically killed by friendly fire in the mountains of Afghanistan. Prior to his death, Tillman called the American invasion and occupation of Iraq effing illegal. Former U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson reportedly had a massive Johnson that he was very proud of. He was known to frequently display it in public and even nicknamed it Jumbo. Apparently, when LBJ used urinals, if another guy walked into the bathroom, he'd turn around and shake his hog at the guy while saying, "Have you ever seen anything as big as this?" Eadwig, King of England from 955 to 959, allegedly left his coronation feast to have a threesome with his future wife and her mother. He was only 15 years old at the time. In the early 1900s, King Edward VII had a custom-made love chair. The chair allowed the 300-pound man to indulge in his sexual fantasies without crushing his female partners. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, is notoriously said to have lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave, who died just 11 days after giving birth to Mary. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for more than 30 years until her death in 1851. The career of actor Armie Hammer quickly fell off in 2021, when several women accused him of being an abusive partner and aspiring cannibal. For example, his ex-girlfriend Courtney Vucekovich says their relationship was like dating Hannibal Lecter. She claims he genuinely tried convincing her to remove one of her ribs so that he could barbecue and eat it. In a collection of alleged messages, Armie claimed that he wanted to cut her skin and drink her blood, but that he would stitch her up again so as not to waste a perfect slave. He also wrote about wanting to pounce on her and grape her at knife point while she cried, and wanting to cut off one of her toes to keep a piece of her with him at all times. In response to these disturbing allegations, Armie was quoted saying, "I don't think that's any different than when someone looks at a baby and goes, 'Oh my God, look at those fat little legs. I just want to eat you up.'" 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After his phone was stolen in 2020, 16-year-old Kevin Bui set a Denver house on fire that he mistakenly thought was the thief's home. The blaze tragically killed 5 members of an innocent family, including 2 young kids. Bui was tried as an adult and sentenced to 60 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. While working in his garage in 2012, Chicago man Dante Autolo accidentally shot a 3-inch nail directly into his skull. But he had no idea the nail had entered his brain until he started feeling nauseous 36 hours later, and a dozen doctors were completely stunned when they saw his x-rays. The nail was surgically removed and Dante miraculously made a full recovery after his meth-addicted wife spread a false rumor that he was a pedophile. Australian father Bradley Lyons was kidnapped and attacked by a vigilante group of pedophile hunters. He was tortured with lighters and knuckle dusters and threatened with a shotgun in his mouth for not confessing to his crimes. At some point, the group poured hot water over Bradley's head and cut off his hand with a chainsaw since he continued to deny the false allegations. They then left him in the trunk of a hot car for 21 hours before executing him in the woods. Several people were sentenced to years in prison for the horrific murder, including Bradley's wife. In one of the most disturbing cases ever shown on My Strange Addiction, a Tennessee woman named Casey developed a heartbreaking obsession after her husband Sean died suddenly from an asthma attack. Stricken with grief, she began carrying his urn everywhere, talking to it, sleeping beside it, and treating it like her husband was still alive. One day, when some of the ashes accidentally spilled on her hand, she instinctively licked them off, and soon enough became addicted to doing it deliberately. She admitted to eating the ashes up to 5 times per day, worried that if she ever stopped, she'd truly lose him forever. The ashes reportedly tasted like sand and rotten eggs, but she couldn't resist the rare feeling of closeness it gave her. Over time, she eventually consumed nearly a pound of her husband's remains, until appearing on the show finally made her realize how far her grief had gone. After filming, Casey entered therapy and eventually stopped consuming the ashes, keeping his urn nearby as a reminder of love rather than loss. Pop icon Britney Spears has lived through one of the most disturbing public downfalls in modern celebrity history. After a 2007 breakdown that saw her shave her head and attack a paparazzi's car, she was placed under an involuntary psychiatric hold, and shortly after, her father gained full control of her life through a conservatorship that lasted 13 years. During that time, Britney claims she was drugged, forced into rehab, and even denied basic freedoms like driving, marriage, or spending her own money. Even after regaining her freedom in 2021, Britney has described the trauma as something that crushed her soul, leaving her forever haunted by the years she spent as a prisoner of her own fame. This driver was extremely lucky they lived in Australia, where cars are right-hand drive. At just 9 years old, Louis Joseph Xavier, the oldest son of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, suffered a fatal injury after a fall. He admitted he'd been pushed but refused to name the culprit, afraid they'd be punished. The wound became infected and he died in agony soon after, but never ratted on his friend. His death shattered his parents. Both would be executed just 2 years later, as the monarchy he was meant to inherit completely crumbled. 2013, Sweden submerged a neon sign of a gay soldier to deter Russian submarines from entering their waters. Using sonar, the sign emits the message, "This way if you are gay," in Morse code. There have been no reports of Russian submarine sightings ever since. In 1944, the Ghost Army was created as the first tactical deception unit in the U.S. Army. They used inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and loudspeakers blaring sound effects to throw off their enemies. The Ghost Army was able to make a force seem 30 times larger than its actual size, often sending the Nazis retreating. A U.S. naval destroyer once won a battle against a Japanese submarine by throwing potatoes at them, which the Japanese thought were grenades and quickly retreated. Ancient Persian leader Cambyses II once used cats to defeat an Egyptian army. Knowing that the Egyptians viewed felines as sacred, he brought hundreds of cats to the front lines and had his soldiers paint them on their shields. The Egyptians simply refused to fight and were easily defeated as a result. When going to battle against enemies riding elephants, the Indian Rajputs would put fake trunks on their horses, making them appear as baby elephants, which the enemy's elephants refused to attack. During the Cold War, CIA agents used a secret method of communication based on how their shoelaces were tied. Many warships used to be painted like optical illusions. The purpose of this dazzle camouflage was not to conceal the ship, but rather to mislead the enemy by making the ship's speed and range more difficult to estimate, much to the same effect as patterns seen on zebras, giraffes, and jaguars. The Nazis used crooked picture bombs specifically intended for officers. When retreating, they left paintings on the walls and skewed them to the side, so when they were straightened, they were rigged to explode. The Royal Air Force dropped matchbooks into enemy territory containing instructions on how a soldier could fake an illness. Once Nazi command heard of this, they stopped sending their troops home when they said they were sick. Therefore, many genuinely sick troops were sent into combat, resulting in even more disease and death.